can run the best campaign, you can even become the nominee, and you can have the election stolen from you.
How can you win with Russian interference, though?
That's a real thing.
What I'm scared about in 2020.
But rightly.
Because I think he's an illegitimate president that didn't really win. So how do you fight against that in 2020?
You are absolutely right.
He's an illegitimate president in my mind.
Would you be my vice presidential candidate? Folks, look, I absolutely agree.
Trump didn't actually win the election in 2016. He lost the election, and he was put into office because the Russians interfered.
Trump knows he's an illegitimate president.
The president-elect, although legally elected, is not legitimate.
I don't see this president-elect as a legitimate president.
You said you believe that Russia's interference altered the outcome of the election.
I do. We have a president who, if in fact it is proven, has been assisted by the Russians and may in fact not be a legitimate president.
The one thing that Trump is fearful of when it comes to his being president is that finally we will see how illegitimate his victory actually was.
I have an objection.
I object to the 15 votes from the state of North Carolina. I object because people are horrified.
He's an illegitimate president.
Do you believe Trump is a legitimate president?
What I believe is that there's no question that the outcome of this election was affected by the Russian interference.
There absolutely is a cloud of illegitimacy.
So that legitimacy is in question, yes. So that was a very tainted election. And in that sense, it's illegitimate.
Why do you think the president is going to such great lengths to essentially prove that he beat you?
Because he knows he didn't. He knows he's an illegitimate president.
Stolen emails, stolen drone, stolen election. Welcome to the world of unprecedented Trump.
So do you believe President Trump is an illegitimate president?
Based on what I just said, which I can't retract.
In the Russian attempt to have the election, and frankly, the FBI is weighing in on the election, I think makes his election illegitimate.
There was a widespread understanding that this election was not on the level. We still don't know what really happened, Isaac. I mean, there's just a lot that I think will be revealed, history will discover, but you don't win by 3 million votes and have all this other shenanigan stuff going on and not come away with an idea like, whoa, something's not right here.
The outcome of the election was affected by their interference, and now we need to know, to what degree, if any, the Trump campaign was actually in collusion with with Russia.
He knows he's an illegitimate president. So of course he's obsessed with me. And I believe that it's a guilty conscience.
We actually won the last presidential election, folks. They stole the last presidential election.
And Al Gore won that election. I think he won it anyway.
Actually, I think I carried Florida.
Bush versus Gore. A court took away a presidency.
If all the votes were counted in Florida, that Al Gore would be president today and George Bush would be back in office.
I come from Florida, where you and others participated in what I call the United States coup d'etat.
There's no doubt in my mind that Al Gore was elected president.
I rise to object to the fraudulent 25 Florida electoral votes.
I must object because of the overwhelming evidence of official misconduct, deliberate fraud, and an attempt to suppress voter turnout.
It is signed by myself on behalf of my diverse constituents and the millions of Americans who have been disenfranchised by Florida's inaccurate vote count. The Supreme Court, not the people of the United States, decided this election.
Speaking to a Democratic group in Chicago Tuesday, he made it clear he thinks Al Gore was the winner.
By the time it was over, our candidate had won the popular vote, and the only way they could win the election was to stop the voting in Florida.
Catherine Harris, Jeb Bush, Jim Baker, and the Supreme Court hadn't tampered with the results, Al Gore would be president.
The Supreme Court elected the president. 2004, yes. Al Gore won the state of Florida in 2000, although not the presidency.
But the Supreme Court tampered? That's a large charge. The Supreme Court stopped the counting of the votes, and if they'd let the count go on, Al Gore would have got the necessary votes.
The Supreme Court selected George W. Bush as the president. He was not elected.
There is overwhelming evidence that George W. Bush did not win this election.
What I observed as a voter, as a citizen of Illinois 4 years ago, were troubling evidence of the fact that not every vote was being counted.
I don't think that George W. Bush won the election in 2000 against Al Gore, because I think he probably lost Florida and also that nationwide. If you invite me back on this show in about 8 weeks, I think you're going to learn that Al Gore actually did get all the votes there.
The court has been thwarting formation of the popular will, the most spectacular example being Bush versus Gore, where the majority, by a 5-4 vote, enjoined the counting of more than 100,000 ballots in Florida and essentially gave America its first court-appointed president.
I think in 2000, everybody thought, well, he did win the election, Al Gore.
After the election, when you stole the election, you came back here and said, get over it. No, we're not going to get over it.
You know it, I know it, they know it. We won that election.
Constantly shifting vote tallies in Ohio and malfunctioning electronic machines, which may not have paper receipts, have led to additional loss of confidence by the public.
The right to vote has been stolen from qualified voters.
In 2004, the democratic process was thwarted.
The 2004 presidential election in Ohio was riddled with unnecessary problems.
Some machines malfunctioned, causing votes to be counted more than once, or not at all.
Based upon an inordinate number of allegations suggesting gross voting rights violations and misconduct, I join with my colleagues in objecting to counting the state of Ohio's electoral votes.
As in 2000, the votes of many who wanted to vote were not, in fact, counted.
This last Friday night, I arranged to meet Senator Kerry at a fundraiser to give him a copy of my book. He told me he now thinks the election was stolen.
The wife of John Kerry said she has lingering doubts about the legitimacy of the election. Her theory goes like this. Two brothers, she calls hard right Republicans, own 80% of voting machines in the U.S. Therefore, it would be easy to hack into the mother machines that control the electronic voting.
There were numerous irregularities in Ohio, including large percentages of rejections of provisional balloting, problems with voting machines.
As we look at our election system, I think it's fair to say that there are many legitimate questions about its accuracy, about its integrity.
There are still legitimate concerns over the integrity of our elections.
I agree with tens of millions of Americans who are very worried that when they cast the ballot on an electronic voting machine, that there is no paper trail to record that vote.
The numerous irregularities that occurred with the electronic voting machines in Ohio on November the 2nd of last year point to an unresolved national crisis.
We cannot declare that the election of November 2nd, 2004 was free and clear and transparent and real. There must be independent testing of the voting machines used in Ohio.
I'm not confident that the election in Ohio was fairly decided. We know that there was substantial voter suppression and the machines were not reliable.
The members of Congress who have brought this challenge are speaking up for their aggrieved constituents, many of whom may have been disenfranchised in this process.
Treating today's electoral vote count in Congress as a meaningless ritual would be an insult to our democracy unless we registered our own protest against the obviously flawed voting process that took place in so many of our states.
Voters who wish to cast a vote for president or vice president can't approach the polls with certainty that their vote will be counted.
One of the most significant problems in Ohio and in many other states was the lack of measures to ensure the integrity of electronic voting machines.
In 2004, they caused Democratic voters in Ohio to wait for 8 hours before they could cast their ballot. They turned the Department of Civil Rights of the Justice Department into the voter suppression division with voter ID laws, voter purging, voter caging, voter intimidation. There aren't going to be any more election stealings.
And despite the final tally and the inauguration and the situation we find ourselves in, I do have one very affirmative statement to make. We won.
Without voter suppression, Stacey Abrams would be the governor of Georgia. Andrew Gillum is the governor of Florida.
You refuse to concede and say that you lost. Do you stand by that decision today?
Absolutely. The election was not fair. The process was not fair.
If Stacey Abrams doesn't win in Georgia, they stole it. It's clear. It's clear.
I think that Stacey Abrams' election is being stolen from her.
It was not a free and fair election.
Brian Kemp stole the gubernatorial election from Georgians and Stacey Abrams.
But will I say that this election was not tainted, was not a disinvestment and a disenfranchisement of thousands of voters?
I will not say
Republicans that support Israel. Important reminder. This guy was an Israeli spy. He worked for Mossad. And if you haven't read Whitney Webb's books detailing this extensively, I'll run through some quick ones. Homegirl Ghislaine has many extensive ties to Israel, not the least of which being her father, one of the most famous or infamous Mossad agents of all time. Although now he's the second most infamous Mossad agent. Or Epstein's closest business partner, Wexner, deeply tied to Israel, and a lot of other really messed up things. Or Ace Greenberg, who first brought Epstein up through Bear Stearns into banking and basically put him on the path he was on. I mean, even Hoffenberg, with whom Jeffrey Epstein was a big part of Tower Financials Corp., if you know any history, he was Jewish as well. And had so much important information in that brain of his that he wound up mysteriously dead with no cause of death when Epstein was awaiting trial. Just one of several mysterious deaths. And it's important to clarify that not all Jewish people are Zionists, not all Jewish people support what Israel's doing. This is not about Jewish people. It's like if the Vatican were to commit a genocide against a neighboring country and we were to try to look at who was involved in the Vatican's genocide, there would be a lot of Christians in that mix. And it would not be irrelevant to talk about people's Christianity if the Vatican was committing genocide. Unfortunately, a Jewish state is committing a genocide, and so a lot of Jews are involved in that. But not all Jews. And no one should be expressing hatred towards all Jews internationally. That's ridiculous. Full stop. But there's this myth amongst the people that they've somehow gotten away with that we're not allowed to talk about Jeffrey because the billionaires that were on his list don't want us to talk about Jeffrey. And that is not why. We're not allowed to talk about Jeffrey because he was Israeli. And Israel controls the places where we talk about Jeffrey. You know, like Jeffrey spent decades going out of his way since 2003 and before courting tech entrepreneurs Larry Page and Sergey Brin. It's not Bill Gates that's keeping us from talking about Epstein. It's Israel. Oh yeah, and while we're talking to Republicans about Israel, you know who Israel has bought? Our president is the highest receiver of Israeli money in all of congressional history, shortly followed by Hillary Clinton, whose husband had certain ties to a certain financier. Probably just a coincidence that the last time Israel made a major offensive move against Palestine was during Bill Clinton's presidency. And do I need to get started on the son who has had 3 different laptops at least taken by Lord knows who? Where for some reason he was choosing to take compromising videos. Almost like someone had something on him that could tell him to take more compromising videos, like, you know, wearing Stars of David and stuff like that, because that's just a normal thing you do prolifically on laptops that then get stolen. And like, don't look into how many of the wives of the Biden children were Jewish, because it's a weirdly high number, not the least of which being this young lady that doesn't look perturbed by this photo at all. Why do you suppose a woman that looks like this marries a 53-year-old crackhead? And not just like any marries a 53-year-old crackhead, but marries him and gets matching tattoos with him less than a week after meeting him. This is from the Times of Israel. They're totally not bragging about how this cute young Jewish woman got Hunter Biden married within 6 days of meeting her. Not a handler at all. By the way, that's their son that they had immediately upon meeting. In case you've been living under a rock, the wars between Israel and Palestine have been going on for decades. And for some reason, we just happen to get an enormous escalation of Israeli violence against Palestinians based upon obviously Hamas started it all. Like, nothing happened this year before Hamas attacked. But now we've got this huge Israeli invasion killing thousands of women and children in broad daylight in front of everybody. Literally bulldozing over civilians inside of hospital camps. Like, disgusting. And it just so happens to fall during the presidency of one of the most heavily Israeli targeted figures in U.S. government history. Like, from blackmail angles, from political lobbying angles. Like, I had a whole chart about it in my Obsidian file, and for some reason it reverted to an old version and doesn't have any of the new versions saved. And I don't know what to make of that, but my notes on Joe Biden's ties to Israel were wiped out. So yeah, Republicans, if you didn't click away from this to try to stay in your little denial pit and you made it this far, I commend you. If you're supporting Israel, they are responsible for the largest human trafficking ring in modern history. That is them. And they use that ring to influence American and other foreign politicians like in Britain and other places. And we are now seeing a big move, a gambit on that influence operation. Think about it. What are you supporting? And what's more anti-Semitic? Calling out a genocide or supporting a ring of pedophilia and the massacre of thousands of innocent women and children in the name of a Jewish homeland? That's not a good look for Jewish people. And a lot of Jewish people want nothing to do with that look, because that's not, no. So yeah, just because your party believes a thing doesn't mean you have to believe the thing too. Like, the amount of cognitive dissonance on the internet right now is mind-blowing.
Does TikTok support freedom of speech? Yes, it's one of the commitments I've given.
Echoing the same exact language used in Nazi Germany. He proudly posts on social media the words that best describe his 2024 campaign. Quote, revenge, quote, power, and quote, dictatorship. There's no confusion about who Trump is. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal. It's an idea declared in the Declaration, created in a way that we've viewed everybody as equal and should be treated equal throughout their lives. We've never fully lived up to that. We have a long way to go. But we've never walked away from the idea. We've never walked away from it before. And I promise you, I will not let Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans force us to walk away now. Remember after 2020, January 6th insurrection to undo the election in which more Americans had voted than any other in American history? America saw the threat posed to the country, and they voted them out. In 2022, historic midterm election, in state after state, election after election, the election deniers were defeated. Now in 2024, Trump is running as the denier-in-chief, the election denier-in-chief. Once again, he's saying he won't honor the results of the election if he loses. Trump says he doesn't understand. Well, he still doesn't understand the basic truth. That is, you can't love your country only when you win. You can't love your country only when you win. Honor, truth. We still believe that no one, the president, is above the law. Trump began his 2024 campaign by glorifying the failed violent insurrection on our Capitol. The guy who claims law and order sows lawlessness and disorder. Trump's not concerned about your future, I promise you. Trump is now promising a full-scale campaign of revenge and retribution, his words, for some years to come. They were his words, not mine.
On page 294 of the report, Bobby, there's this, it kind of jumps out of the page at you. It's titled Hillary Clinton and Foundation, Crime Against Children. And it's referencing all the emails that were on this Wiener laptop. And there was an effort to, I guess, sequester certain emails away from the probe. You can see, Coleman's notes from October 4th contain the following entry. Anthony Weiner, unrelated. Anthony Weiner texting 15-year-old sexually explicit initial analysis of laptop, thousands of emails, etc. but they had a conversation about which emails would be allowed to be looked at in this case and which would be, set aside. And that also raises a lot of questions. I mean, Huma Abedin and Hillary Clinton exchanged thousands of emails, apparently, that were not, I don't think they were looked at in this investigation at all. And, Bobby, your reaction to where we are here.
Yeah, I think that specific question, I think, has to do with the search warrants. So the New York office of the FBI, who actually initially got the search warrant on that laptop, it was for that sexual crimes case against Anthony Weiner. And that had, specificity requirements of the warrant say you can only look for certain things. So they were looking for emails of that type. When it was transferred down to Washington for the Clinton email, they were looking for different things. And that's why the call went to New York, from New York to Washington 2 weeks later, saying, hey, did you guys get your warrant? You need to get a warrant for the stuff that you want to look for on that laptop. And to Saul's point, it's my opinion, this is only my opinion, that I think they were sitting on that laptop and they thought they could sit on it till after the election. But when New York called down and said, what are you doing with this? Why haven't you gotten a warrant yet for your stuff? That panicked them. They then went and told Comey. I don't even think Comey knew, because he claims not to have known, but there's no reason why he didn't know. Didn't he go to McCabe and say, why did you wait 2 weeks before you brought this to me? Oh, come on.
There's this, it kind of jumps out of the page at you. It's titled Hillary Clinton and Foundation, Crime Against Children.
These people are sick. These people are sick. Hillary's belief that it takes a village, which only makes sense, after all, in places like Haiti, where she's taken a number of them.
That panicked them. They then went and told Comey. I don't even think Comey knew, because he claims not to have known, but there's no reason why he didn't know. Didn't he go to McCabe and say, why did you wait 2 weeks before you brought this to me?
Come on.
A reasonable prosecutor would bring such a case. As a result, although the Department of Justice makes final decisions on matters like this, we are expressing to Justice our view that no charges are appropriate in this case.
Prior to 1913, the American people had direct veto power against spending policies of the federal government, because in order for the federal government to borrow any money, it had to go to the people. There was no central bank it could go to. It had to sell bonds. If you didn't want to go to war, you didn't buy the bonds. If you didn't want this pork project that the government had in mind, you didn't buy the bonds. It was a very simple system, a Republican system whereby you had veto power, economic veto power. And it worked very well until 1913. That's how come government managed to stay small, because it didn't have an unlimited credit line to go on a shopping spree for 80 years and make you pay for it. So in 1913, there was this convenient new arrangement made. The Federal Reserve Act created an unlimited credit line for the federal United States government to borrow directly from the Federal Reserve Bank, and obligated the American people to pay it back.
Ford is working on technology that would remotely repossess a car. If owners ignore warnings about missed payments, the system starts to disable features like GPS, air conditioning, cruise control, and the radio. It can also lock the owner out of the car. According to a patent application with the U.S. government, the technology can also make the car drive off private property to be picked up by a tow truck.
Big Brother's not playing around.
No.
Whoa.